Hello and welcome everybody to a brand new episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. My name is Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, I'd really appreciate it though if you could hit that subscribe button as well as have notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. The form says you must inspect all donations. Years ago, I started a new job. I'm a biology professor, and this new job was at a small private college. Note, as this is important and people sometimes confuse these terms, private is not the same as for profit. Private just means that we aren't operated by the state. Like most colleges, we're a non-profit. This college is also located within easy driving distance of a branch of a large state university. One of the first things I do is to get us some free stuff. We have a lot of out-of-date equipment, analog when everyone's moved to digital, and a lot less glassware, beakers, etc. Some of my grad student buddies work at a large state university nearby, so I call them up and ask if anyone's clearing out their lab. See, at a lot of these universities, when faculty leaves or retires or anything is left in their lab that isn't cutting edge and super expensive, it goes into state surplus. There are only two legal ways that I know of to avoid sending these things to surplus. Move it to someone else in the department or donate it to a nonprofit. It turns out that I actually know the person who all of this equipment goes to, after being picked over in-house to be surplused, and so she lets me come by her storage space and pick through it next. Great story, right? I solve a problem for us, and large state university saves time and looks generous. Of course, that's not the end of this, or it wouldn't belong here. It turns out that I'm unaware of two things. First, by doing this, I have just made someone senior to me, but not in my command chain, look incompetent. This isn't hard, since that's the truth. Second, one of the reasons we seem not to have replaced things in a while is that there were, several years before I came, some major financial shenanigans. The store, where senior people resign, effective immediately, and locks on the office doors get changed overnight. Because of the second point, paperwork has been created to document all sorts of transactions around the college. I don't know that this is helpful paperwork, since the sorts of transactions I'm about to describe weren't part of the financial shenanigans, but as we know from thermodynamics, once useful work is converted into paperwork, it can never be converted back into useful work again. Needless to say, Senior Professor complains to my department chair that I haven't filled out the donation paperwork, and so I'm violating our financial transparency obligations. I'm basically just Satan, etc. It probably doesn't help that Senior Professor also has the sort of attitude towards paperwork that leads me to suspect that instead of pets, she has stacks of compliance forms lying around her house. My department chair, the person who could actually fire me, gives me the forms and asks that I fill them out appropriately. One item on this form is an estimate of the financial size of the gift. Obviously, if you're donating a few $1,000s to the university, which is probably what the form is actually for, you just write down the amount. For physical items, you need to estimate their value. I have a box of random equipment that I know more are coming of, and I don't want to waste time looking up every piece of equipment, writing the price down, calculating some sort of reasonable discount because it's used items, and putting the full itemized list in the space available, which is about this large blank. Still not the real malicious compliance here, but I duck this one. I didn't donate anything, I say. My chair is confused. But you came in with this box of glassware and told everyone in the department you come get what they needed from it. Right, but that's a donation from a large state university to our college, not to me. I just drove it here out of the goodness of my heart. If they donated it to me personally, that would be illegal, since they're required to donate it to a non-profit. My chair, who came from industry and has a bit more business sense than some pure researchers, understands that this is correct. However, I can see that there's a problem coming. The next set of things I want to get are some decent animal skulls. We have about 3 species on hand, one of them human. Everywhere else I've taught, we generally have at least a dozen species on hand, and it's very useful when you're teaching anything that involves comparative anatomy. My plan has been to use my own skills to clean the skulls of road-killed animals. That would be a donation from me every time, and I don't want to do this paperwork. It's now Christmas, and I'm visiting with some of my wife's friends back home. They're reminded that I'm a biologist, and walk me out into the woods where they show me a deer skull. It's been there for years. We never had a use for it. It's yours if you want it. It's a doe, no antlers, which is what most people want. But for scientific purpose, that's fine, and we don't have one at work, so I take it. Several weeks later, all the relevant parties are back on campus. I wrap up the skull in a plastic grocery bag and take it to donate. A note about old skulls in case for some reason you don't have a career where you need to age skeletal elements by looking at them. Mammal skulls are made from very separate bones that fuse together at the edges. As a skull ages outside in the elements, many of these sutures open. This means that a skull that's been sitting outside for long enough is extremely dirty. The dirt's just dirt, since maggots and other flesh-eating insects pick every scrap of flesh away. But an item full of crevices sitting on dirt while leaves falling on it picks up a lot of debris. If you don't know anything about old skulls, you, rather naturally, assume that the debris are rotting flesh. The bag is there to contain this dirt. I need the donation form, I tell our admin assistant. She gives me the form, I walk back to my office, and I carefully fill it out. Where it says, value of donation, I fill in $0. This is important. I technically don't need to fill out this paperwork if the item's worthless, but I need to fill out the paperwork because I need to present the paperwork and the item to our financial department so that they can verify that the item is worthless and that I didn't need to do the paperwork. A brilliant, well-designed system, as you can see. I ask our admin assistant where our financial office is, since I'm still new enough that I don't really know. She tells me where, but says that she has to go to that building anyway, and she'd be happy to take the paperwork and the item with her. I say thanks, but no thanks. I'm taking it over now. I walk into the financial office. Everyone has a fancy nameplate, a desk with neatly marked trays for incoming and outgoing forms, and everyone seems to be dressed like someone had said, dress like you handle money all day, but actually buy everything from Walmart. Thankfully, the nameplates include job titles, so I walk over to the person who needs to validate my claims. What is this about? She asks. I have this donation for the biology department, and I've been told I need to fill out this paperwork and that you need to see the item. That's correct, she says, while taking the paperwork from me. She starts to read, frowning like she might be about to accuse me of fraud. It's quite possible that, contrary to her parents' instructions, she made that face for so long it's frozen this way. And this is the item, I say, reaching into a ratty plastic bag and pulling out the skull. The nose, pointed towards her, is a gaping hole with thin bones called turbinates winding back to the recesses of the skull. There's also a leaf wedged into the nose somehow out in the woods. A chunk of dirt drops from the inside of the brain case and falls to the floor. What is that? She says, clearly thrown off her routine. I've learned that most people find most mammal skulls look the exact same, even though to me they look very different. A deer skull, I say. It was found in the woods by friends of mine. Here, take a look. I helpfully extend the skull towards her. A trickle of debris loosens itself from the back of the eye socket and rattles off onto the papers on her desk. I can see her cringe. I've assessed its value at $0, but I was told that you needed to personally inspect items to make sure of this. I turn the skull over in my hands as I say this, still holding it out in presentation mode, as if I thought she couldn't properly assess its value without examining the strange brown stain on the bone that once formed the roof of its mouth. I agree with the assessment, she says quite rapidly. At this point, I relent slightly and pull the skull back towards my chest so it's no longer extended to her desk. I casually fish a partial leaf from a structure in the top surface of the skull and drop it into the plastic bag I brought. I have a few more of these coming, I mention. I'll be cleaning those myself, so they'll be in better shape. Possibly more organic material left on them, though. Will you be needing to see those as well? No, she says quite definitively. So, just to get this straight, you, as a representative of our financial office, are telling me that all donations of such biological specimens are worth $0 and that you do not want to see them or the accompanying paperwork? Yes, she says. I stick the skull back into its traveling bag and, as a gesture of goodwill, sweep some debris off her desk into the bag as well. It's a deal. TLDR, all donated items must be inspected by finance to make sure you aren't bribing someone. I donate an item which no one wants to inspect. It's a fact. Football referees actually know the laws better than the coaches. When there's not a pandemic screwing up our lives, I'm a soccer referee. Being a referee can be very rewarding in its own right, but you have to have the right mindset for it. Half of the verbal vomit that comes from the uninformed parents would be downright laughable if it wasn't so pathetically bad. The other half of the verbal vomit comes from the coaches who will do or say anything to get that W. This is one such example. Quick note for those who don't know or follow soccer. When a referee issues a yellow card, it's telling the player or coach, and everyone else, that they're cautioned for their actions and or behavior, and to be on their best behavior because the next instance is a send-off. 2 yellow cards equal a red card. Straight red cards, no yellows first, are reserved for extremely bad or disgusting behavior. Spitting, foul and abusive language, extremely violent or excessive acts, or incidents that are not soccer plays, amongst some other things. So 3 years ago, on an under-14 match, 13-year-olds, I had a coach from the away team who was the epitome of the annoying coach, complaining about every call that didn't go his way, arguing that every foul committed by the opponent deserved a yellow card, yelling at his players, etc. His team took on his personality, so they too questioned every single call, and his parents were making themselves heard as well. Eventually, Jerk Coach earned himself a yellow card for his non-stop commentary, aka dissent. That shut him down for a bit, but he just ended up making passive-aggressive comments to his team that were actually directed toward me, like, "That's not a foul, Raul. You just keep playing the way you do. Don't worry about that bad call." I knew I could send him off for it, but the paperwork would be a headache and he might get let off easy, so I just waited and continued to give him more rope. Meanwhile, some of his players began to get mouthy in his stead, so a couple of them received yellow cards themselves. Near the end of the second half, with the score 2-1 in the favor of the Jerk Coach, one of his players committed a straight red card offense, a denial of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity as the second-to-last man between the attacker and the goal outside the penalty area. He disagreed, as they all do, but I had the call right and wasn't going to change it. His parents decided to get up and start screaming and cursing in Spanish at me, walking around behind the goal to do so. He was quickly dismissed to the parking lot, and as I did this, one of the other players called me a pinche cabrón, which in Spanish is basically slang for a, how do I put this in YouTube terms? A freaking butthole. Yeah, we'll go with that. He too was dismissed, and all of a sudden, Jerk Coach was down 9 players and minus a parent. I knew he was going to come uncorked. It was just a matter of time. It didn't take long, though. When incidences happen during a soccer match that are outside of the normal plays, like substitutions, retrieving balls, regular fouls, etc., the referee is supposed to add time back for the time lost. This is clearly spelled out in Law 7 of the Laws of the Game. Since the parent took his sweet time walking up the hill to the parking lot, stopping to turn around and cuss again and again, and because of the 2 player dismissals, I counted approximately 5 minutes of time wasted. So I announced at the end of the regular time, we're playing 5 more. Jerk Coach absolutely lost the plot. "No way, there's no way, that's too long." At this point, the ball's gone out of play, so I take a brief moment to jog over to Jerk Coach's sideline. "Coach, you had 2 players dismissed and a parent who refused to leave in a timely manner. According to my watch, those 3 incidences took a total of just about 5 minutes, so I set stoppage time for 5 minutes. Remember, Jerk Coach is only up by a goal and is playing 9 versus 11, so of course he doesn't want time extended. Alas, he decides to double down. "That's crap! That's total crap! You're giving them the game! You need to do your job!" I need to do my job. Just the malicious compliance I'd been waiting for. Funny you should say that, Coach. One of my duties is to ensure that the amount of time lost because of delays is added back to the match, so I'm already doing my job. One of my other duties is to stop dissent, and since you've already been cautioned for dissent, here's your second caution. You're now dismissed for irresponsible behavior. It took Jerk Coach a second to realize I wasn't kidding. Then he went off on a cursing tangent, pacing back and forth in front of his bench, complaining about home cooking and how he was going to make sure I never refereed again. I just stood there about 10 yards from the bench and let him rant and rave for a good while, remembering he's doing this in front of his bench with 7 13-year-olds sitting there and another 9 on the field watching the whole spectacle. When he paused for a moment, I jumped in. Another one of my jobs is to submit reports on every dismissal, including yours. Everything you've said leading up to and post-dismissal directed toward me and my crew will be going in my report. You now have 2 minutes to get your stuff and get to the parking lot. Otherwise, I'll abandon this match, and that will also go into my report with your failure to leave in a timely manner noted as the direct reason for it. An abandoned match due to a team's failure to adhere to the rules in league play is the absolute worst thing that could happen, and Jerk Coach knew it. The league rules state that the team causing the abandonment gets fined $250, takes an 0-4 loss regardless of the score at the time of the game, which means they lose 4 points in goal differential, and the head coach gets a 2-game suspension without appeal, with geometrically escalating fines and suspensions for repeat offenders. He didn't say another word, just glared at me the entire time as he got his stuff and left. I added an additional 3 minutes so that the already added 5 for stoppage time could be because of his actions. His opponent tied the game in the 7th minute of stoppage time, 2 minutes past the original 5, thanks to Jerk Coach's combustion. If he'd just shut his mouth and played it out, he would have walked away with a win. Post-match, after I submitted the reports, I checked on the status of the players and the coach. The player that committed the denial foul received the standard 1-game suspension, and the player that insulted me received the standard 3-game suspension. Those were expected. The punishments for each are clearly spelled out in the league rules. The parent had a hearing which I attended via a teleconference, and he was fined $100 and received a 2-game suspension. The Jerk Coach? At his hearing, which I also attended via teleconference, he was found to have committed irresponsible behavior, failure to leave the area and field in a timely manner immediately after being dismissed, and foul and abusive language directed towards the match officials. In addition, it was found that his actions brought disrepute on the game, and so he received a 6-game suspension plus mandatory anger management counseling. In the intervening years since, I've reffed his team twice. Both times, he got an early yellow card. Both times, he sat down and just shut up for the remainder of the match. Literally, not a word from him at all. Do my job? You betcha! I do it very well. TLDR, coach finds out very quickly that telling a referee to do his job results in said referee doing exactly what the job entails, including coach's dismissal. Edit. Clarified, I attended both hearings via teleconference. This was 3 years ago, people. No Zoom yet. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of today's Malicious Compliance. If you like the stories, be sure to leave a like on the video, as well as subscribe with notifications turned on so you could stay up to date with all the latest and greatest. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and we try to upload just about every single day here on the channel. So I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.